Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Jarrell Mason, aka Jay Mason. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Album Cover, where we get inside the entertainment industry with those in the know and give them their flowers while they're here to be celebrated. With me, I have a man who is a legend, all caps, in the music industry. Joined Prince Band in 1978, and then that morphed into the Revolution. He's done work with mentioned the Revolution, NPG, New Power Generation, Madhouse. You've seen him in Purple Rain, and that album sold 25 million copies. Also, co-writing credits on Dirty Mind, Computer Blue, 17 Days, America. It's going to be a beautiful night, as well as studio session credits on Dirty Mind, Controversy, 1999, Purple Rain, Around the World in a Day, Parade, Sign of the Times, Love Sexy, The Black Album, Graffiti Bridge, opened his own studio facility in Minneapolis in 1987 called The Operating Room. We're going to get into everything, all that and more, and then some with the one, the only, the legendary Dr. Fink. Dr. Fink, thank you for coming on to Beyond the Album Cover, and it's an honor to have you on, sir.
Well, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here. And where are you located? I forgot.
I am located out in New Mexico, but I'm from North Carolina. But we're going to talk about
Ah,
that Dorton Arena show that Prince did. I believe you guys were opening up for Rick James at that Dorton Arena show, I believe.
yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so we're gonna get into all that and then some. So let's go right in. So
Okay.
where were you born, and what do you remember being the first record that you bought with your own money going to the record store?
Okay. Well, I was born in Minneapolis in 1958, same year as Prince. And I was in February. I just had my 67th birthday last Saturday, believe it or not.
Happy belated.
Thank you very much. And it's good to still be here, amongst everybody. It's great. Um, Now, my first record, let's see. Boy, that's a good one. But, when I was a little kid, well, by the time I was about 10, believe it or not, I was already making a little money here on the side. I was like, doing a few things where I was making a little, but I don't know if I bought anything right away. I don't know if my parents would get it if I asked them, I think, if I needed something. But I do remember for sure, I was 9 years old. This I do remember for sure. The day but my brother was buying a lot of, he was older than me, like 3 grades ahead. So he was buying a lot of stuff already. So I just was like mooching off his record collection a lot. But I walked into the store the day that the Sergeant Pepper album was released by the Beatles. And that was in 1967, I believe in August of 1967. I purchased it that day with my own money and brought it home and put it on the turntable immediately and listened to it by myself. And it was, it was kind of like evening, after dinner time, like about 8:30 at night, and nobody was around. People were doing something else on the others. So, anyway, my parents weren't around, or I don't know, they must have been out that night. So I listened to this record and I was like, what did I just listen to? I was 9 years old. I'd been listening to the Beatles, since they debuted on Ed Sullivan. Huge influence on me, of course, along with James Brown, the Supremes, the whole thing, the British invasion, the Motown, all that stuff. I was completely a child of the '60s, influenced by all that music that we watched on Ed Sullivan. But the Beatles, that record, is like I didn't understand it at first because it was the psychedelic era, and they were putting out such an interesting, revolutionary uh, way of presenting their art. It was just a whole new thing. They were experimenting with so much in the studio, new sounds, new techniques, uh, psychedelic lyrics. It's a crazy time. The influence they had on culture was unbelievable, along with
Yeah,
all the other artists I just mentioned of the '60s. That whole era was just unbelievable.
yeah, it definitely was a great time because going and listening to Sergeant Pepper's and then listen to their prior albums, they made that shift from being bubblegum
Hmm.
doing Motown love influenced Northern soul sounds, and we're going to really embrace the psychedelic. And then I believe they were also inspired by what Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys were doing with Pet Sounds.
All that, definitely. But I see, I grew up with, everything in our house. My folks were playing Broadway music, Broadway shows, the American songbook classics, Gershwin, you know, all that stuff. Classical. My father was a huge classical fan, aficionado, I should say, because he you know really enjoyed that. So, and jazz. So it was all encompassing. These genres were constantly on our turntable at home growing up
Right,
as well.
right.
Yeah.
So was it with the records in the house where that was dad's possessions, you weren't able to touch it, and you kind of had to
No,
sneaky
no. Oh,
listen, put
no,
it
no,
back
no,
real
no.
carefully, or were you
Oh,
allowed to
oh,
have free
no.
reign?
Heck no. Free reign. Take care of it. He showed us how to take care of the records and clean them, and we did our best to do that. Occasionally, we would screw up and scratch one, but for the most part, it was good. Took care
Great.
of things, Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That was a good thing that your dad did allow you to get that broad musical palette and really
Oh,
take
yeah.
in all the influences that would come into play later. So going into high school, middle school,
Hmm.
and further back, what was your instrument of choice? Was keys always something that was you first drawn into, or did you play any other instruments before going to keys?
Well, piano was what I started out on when I was about 6 years old. And I had teachers all throughout my childhood into my even senior year of high school. I always had some private coaching along the way, excuse me, I'm just going to tell this person I'm not talking to them. There we go. Okay. So was I still
Oh,
coming through even
go,
though a call came
you're
in at the
good.
same
You're
time?
good. You're good.
Okay.
You're good.
Okay. All right. So, anyway, um, long story short, um, what was the question again?
All right, so we're
Sorry.
going from high school further back was keyboards, piano,
Oh
your
yes,
first
keyboard was
instrument of
my
choice.
first instrument of choice, but not totally because my parents were like my dad especially was into getting my brother and I, my older brother and I, on piano lessons. But he certainly didn't force me. First, my older brother started, and he wanted to try it. He was given the option: you want to try this or not? Um, so when I was old enough, they asked me if I wanted to get into it too, and I thought, well, he's my older brother; he's doing it. I might as well give it a shot. Why not? Sure.
Mhm.
So that's how that started. But then, as I got to be a little older, like I'd say around the time I was about 10, 11, 12, I'm not sure exactly, but I wanted to learn drums. So I you know, bugged the heck out of them for some drums. They knew though if they had a drum set in the house, they would lose their minds because I wouldn't stop playing. But they did. I said, "Can I get that thing?" There was a toy snare drum called the Big Bash snare drum back then you could buy. I'll never forget that thing. It was advertised on television, and so they got it for me. And of course, they never heard the end of it. But then eventually I did get a drum kit. And I had that for a while and I was messing around with the drums. But then a friend of mine down the block was a drummer too. And by the time we were like 12 and a half, 12 years old, we had started to play together in a little band of guys, kids that lived nearby. It was our first band that we put together. So he insisted on being the drummer because I was already better at piano than I was at drums, even though I taught him a little bit, a couple of beats I learned that he didn't play yet, but I showed him. But regardless of that, he went on to become an amazing drummer. Worked with some top people too. Anyway, I just been mainly a keyboard player.
Interesting. Now, going forward, prior to joining Prince's band in '78, were you in any local bands in and around the Minneapolis scene, and you guys are making your bones at the various haunts in and around the Twin Cities?
Yeah, yeah, I did that. I traveled around the Midwest, fresh out of high school. Did that for a couple years before joining Prince. By the time I auditioned for Prince, I was getting close to being 21, and let's see, I was just like, I think I auditioned in October of '78. I was 20 at the time, and then I turned 21, in February of the following year. So he hired me in November. So I was just in cover bands for a few years, prior to him. And one of those bands, wrote a few originals and wrote some stuff and recorded them in the studio and all that. But they certainly weren't ready to go national or anything like that. Now, my friend, the drummer, the guy that I grew up with, who
Hmm.
played, he was in one of. I brought him into one of those cover bands after our high school cover. We had a cover band from the time we were 12 until senior year of high school.
Hmm.
We had a cover band. We were
Wow.
kids, and then when I left that right before a few months before graduation, I joined another cover band that was guys were much older than me and more experienced, and they had been traveling the Midwest already, playing all the venues around the Midwest. So I went out with them, and then I brought my drummer friend into that band when their drummer quit and decided to be the sound man.
Wow.
My friend came on board, and then while he was in that band, he'd only been in the band maybe 7 months, if that. And he had the opportunity to audition for a group that was signed to RCA Records. They were local, though. They were based here, but they had been out in LA and they'd been signed to RCA, and they had a great following. And they were amazing. They were called Gypsy, and they hired him. So I lost my buddy at that time to them, and then shortly after that, not too long after, maybe a year, that's when I had my opportunity with Prince.
So now with the
Audition for.
audition, wow, now so with the audition process, was it where it was an open call? Was it referrals? Or was it where you had to pre-prepare something for the audition? So what was that
It,
like going in the
it
audition?
it it was a kind of, um they were looking for people that had some, like, reputation, had some stuff, and at that time, as young as I was, I locally I had some of that going, but there was another gentleman too that Prince liked, and he wanted him before he was interested in looking at me. And then that gentleman decided he didn't want to work in that situation with Prince. He liked Prince, but he didn't think it was for him. He decided not to do that. And then auditions opened up again, and that's when I had my opportunity to get into the group.
Wow. Now, was this right around the time the debut album came out? Because I believe the story was they originally wanted Maurice White to EP the album, but once he performed for Mo Osteen and the heads at Warner Brothers, they said like, no, he's bad. He could do it all. He don't need nobody to EP him. He's self-contained.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I would join the group. Let's see, the first album came out, and I think it was mid, like springtime of '78, and I was in there by October. So the album had been out for a little while, and they did want Maurice White to help produce the album. Prince did not want that. Prince is the one who insisted on self-producing. But even with that, even though they agreed to it, they still wanted another guy hanging out with Prince, another
Mhm.
producer just hanging out, watching stuff. And that was Tommy Vicari from Warner Brothers. And he went in there, and when they were recording out in San Francisco, or I can't remember, somewhere in Sausalito record plant or something, and they teased poor Tommy. Prince and Andre Simone teased him incessantly, and got he got upset and left.
Oh
This
man,
is what I
so
was told by people that were around.
man,
Prince didn't want anybody. He didn't want anybody overseeing, watching him, telling him anything, giving any kind of, like, advice or what you should think he should do. And so Vicari, they just it's so classic Prince. He's a funny man that way. I
so
think
pretty
that's
much
great, though. It's funny how they bugged him and
Yeah,
he couldn't
yeah,
take it anymore.
yeah. Bakari was the mole sent by Mo to say, "Hey,
My
make
Mo Austin, you know about that? You know that story, right?
yeah,
You've heard that story,
about Mo
Tommy
Osteen.
Ricard,
I believe
Mo
so. I've
Austin.
heard Mo Austin. Excuse me. Yeah, but that
Mm-hmm.
just shows how at that time labels were more not artist friendly unless you really had the clout to really show, hey, I can do this on my own. And it took Marvin Gaye and Stevie Wonder years before Barry Gordy relented at Motown to say, hey, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna let you guys express yourselves creatively, but we're gonna put out these safe records that's gonna cross over to a wider audience. But Prince right off the gate was like, no, I got to do it my way. It's my way or no way at all.
Yeah, well, he's smart. And he, at that point, he knew what he wanted. He knew where he was going. He's one of those rare artists at a young age who just were, they just, whatever they did their homework. When they were growing up, he grew up in a musical household, much like me, even though my parents were actors more so than musicians. My mom played a little piano. My dad dabbled in piano. He never took lessons, but he used to mess around on it and play almost like his own, like, wacky classical music because he was such a classical fan. He could write his own stuff. But so those influences were there, and Prince was influenced by all the people around Prince's father growing up, who were great musicians. And I'm sure he had quite a number of mentors growing up, for
Right
sure.
now
But he worked
everybody,
hard. He worked hard, though. He was a workaholic, that Prince.
yeah,
Absolutely, like unmatched. I don't think I've ever known anybody like him, ever.
work to the bone. So when everybody else came in the group, was it a little bit harder for everybody to mesh with the playing styles and be on one accord, or did everybody know anybody from being on the local circuit prior to coming to the band?
Well, I knew Bobby Z because Bobby Z was one of my connections to Prince. He was working for Prince at the time as Owen Husney's Prince's first manager. Bobby was like an assistant to Owen and was helping with Prince in the beginning before Prince hired him as a drummer. Because Prince was looking at different people for drums too, but Bobby was at that time was basically just helping Prince. And Prince played me the demo tape. I mean, Bobby played me Prince's demo tape that his older brother David had helped Prince do, engineered and everything. And I said, "Wow, this is great. Who's the band?" And he goes, "It's not a band. It's one guy doing everything in the studio, and he's your age. You guys are the same age." I go, "You're kidding me. This is like there's nobody does that. There's only a
Mhm.
handful, a few rare people in the industry, and at that young of an age to be, producing and writing something that complicated and tight. You know, it wasn't. It was a rare thing." With that said, I just said, "Hey, if and when he gets a record deal, let me know if he needs a band to back him up. I'd be happy to help him as a keyboardist." And then Bobby kept that in mind, and that's how I was able to get into the audition.
Okay. Now, what was the process like? You guys are prepping, rehearsing, and then he goes out on the road. And I believe when he goes on the road, he was opening for Rick James. So, what was that like being out on the road? And if you can remember the show that took place at the Dorton Arena in Raleigh, North Carolina, can you tell a little bit about the early days of being on the road and touring and just seeing the stage work and the preparation?
Well, first of all, I'm not going to remember details about that city, but I could certainly recall, how the tour went and a lot of aspects of it. Being our first experience opening for someone of
Mhm.
his stature at that time and popularity, that was a big break for Prince to get eyes on him and ears on him that early in his career. So that was a really good break for the group, and it did help propel him further into stardom at the beginning, which was good.
Definitely great. And then talk about the process of morphing into the revolution.
Yeah. that took a minute because that early band was comprised of myself, Bobby Z, Andre Simone, Gail Chapman, and Des Dickerson. And then, fast forward through the 1999 album, by the time Dirty Mind rolled around, Andre Simone had left and Gail Chapman had left, so that Lisa Coleman came in for Gail, and Brown Mark came in, or Mark Brown, I should say, but Prince liked to call him Brown Mark for his stage name. And so you had that was that became almost became the revolution. But the reality is, Des Dickerson, he left right before the Purple Rain era, and Princeton officially coined the term Princeton, the group Prince and the Revolution. Yet he didn't crown it that name yet, because it said revolution backwards on the dotted I of the little football of the Prince 1999 album cover.
Mhm.
I don't know if some people caught that. Did you ever catch that? It's kind of like one of the Beatles things where they put something at the end of a song like in reverse, and then you put
Mhm.
it forward and it says something else. But Prince put a little clue like revolution backwards on the dotted I of the football. But we weren't called, when you look back, you can go look at the play, like the billing of shows or advertising. It was never Prince of the Revolution 1999 tour. Nope. It was never coined that way. Am I right?
Yeah, yeah, I believe so. And then, when you look at that time, late 70s, early 80s, MTV was coming in, and we all know MTV was very hesitant to play black artists,
Right.
and how it was really,
Right.
Prince and Michael Jackson that broke through that barrier. And how was that fight seeing like, okay, I'm not going to be pigeonholed in one genre. I'm going to appeal to everybody, and you guys going to come to me instead of me playing the game.
Yeah. Well, I'd say Michael, he crossed over, but there was, I have to say, in spite of all the racism and all the crap, I I saw times inklings of certain African American artists were breaking through, like Nat King Cole and Sammy Davis Jr. and Chuck Berry and Little Richard, and all. There was a lot of artists coming up that still crossed over to the white population. Unfortunately, that it didn't always translate to radio play. And in Minneapolis, certainly, they did not play Prince's first couple records, even the first three, barely. I think it took 1999 to break through and get on top 40 radio in this market, because they had one R&B pop station called KMOJ in this town, and back then it still exists, but it was segregated, and they only played the black music, and it was sad. I mean, we all knew this. I knew it, and it
Hmm.
pissed me off. It pissed me off. I thought it was stupid. The typical, we all complained about it. David Bowie got on MTV and complained right there. He started to break through with that too. So, a lot of people knew it was wrong, and Prince and Michael Jackson definitely helped break through in pop music. Yes, they
Hmm.
were instrumental in it, but there were others who made progress along the way too.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree because this was during when radio was day parting records where you will only hear R&B records during a certain time of the day, and then
Mm-hmm.
they'll go back to top 40 or middle of the road or wherever of a format that you choose. But once again, like we mentioned, Prince, Michael, and all the other artists, they were able to break through that barrier and appeal to all genres. Now, since we're talking about Michael, I want to ask this. Were you all so deeply locked into tunnel vision with what's going on our side that you weren't paying attention to everything else outside, and you guys were just laser focused on what was going on in the spear?
Well, for me personally, it was definitely a bubble, being inside of like a bubble, right?
Mhm.
Especially once you're on tour, it's just this bubble you're in. It's a lot of security. It's very insulated. But I used to sneak out. I was lucky because I could go out in public. I was the doctor with sunglasses, and I'd be dressed like the doctor. If I didn't dress like that and I go in public without sunglasses on and just regular glasses, people usually didn't recognize me. Occasionally, I would be on tour. I'd get recognized, but it depends. So without my stage clothes, but anyway, uh, I just what was the question again?
Were you guys locked into tunnel vision with everything that
No,
was going on,
no.
or
I
you
was
saw pay attention to everything that was
I
coming out?
paid attention to all the artists that were happening at the time, for sure, for sure. I kept track. In fact, I was friends with some of them that were making waves in the '80s as well. I knew them because they would come to shows and want to hang out backstage and meet us or whatever. So it was a cool time. You know, the we all admired each other's work, and it was a great time of creativity with all those artists that were putting out amazing music. You know, a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, definitely special. And I believe there was this movie called The Idol Maker. It was about this guy who was writing songs and couldn't find an artist to really showcase his music. So he ended up hiring this young, suave, good-looking guy to get the material out. And was that the inspiration for Prince coming up with The Time?
Probably, you know, I wouldn't doubt that he was influenced by that. I don't know
Hmm.
if he never verbalized to me that he was influenced by that movie, but he may have been. It's possible.
Mm. Yeah, so what was it like hearing the time stuff and just how funky, how gritty it was? And I believe, of course, the story goes that Alexander O'Neill was originally going to be the lead singer for the time, but I guess something happened where he left, and then Morris was originally on drums, and then Morris went from drums to frontman of the time.
Yeah, they are all friends. You know, they were doing different things, trying different ideas. But yeah, just that's from what I understand, that's what they were thinking at one point.
Hmm. Yeah. So what was it like when you heard that material and just how funky, how tough it is, and then what you all got going on, and just how everybody in the world was paying attention to what you all were doing? Because if you look at right around the time when everything was going on, you could tell that you all had a pulse on what was going on musically and visually. That a lot of acts popping up, paying attention to what's going on in Minneapolis and say, hey, you get they got something going on.
Yeah, you know, Prince, obviously one of the most prolific songwriters around at the time. I was just lucky to be, you know, able to work alongside him and do some session work for some of his stuff here and there. I mean, he was capable of doing it all, really, and he did many of the songs by himself, all the instruments, you know.
Hmm.
And so he'd just come to the band and go, "Here's a cassette. Go learn all this, guys," you know, and that would be it. Unless we played on it. I mean, like Purple Rain was a more of a group effort. I should say that about that record in particular. Wendy, I'm sorry, Lisa in particular was utilized by Prince, I'd say, more than just about anybody in the band. Once she was in for a Dirty Mind album, Controversy, 1999, she was doing vocals on all those background harmonies. I
Hmm.
think she did a few keyboard parts like me, but primarily by Around the World in a Day, I'd say Wendy and Lisa at that time, and Lisa's brother got involved with Prince more
Hmm.
than other people in the group at that time.
Right.
And
No.
then Parade, that was another kind of revolution effort, more so. And then after that, Sign of the Times came out, and by then the revolution had been disbanded, but I was still in the group.
Hmm. And we were talking before coming on that we're recording this podcast episode on February 13th, the debut day of Sly Stone's documentary, Sly Lives, aka The Burden of Black Genius, directed by
Mm-hmm.
Questlove. And I want to talk about the parallels and influences of Sly on all you all in the work that was coming out.
Well, you know, obviously when I was growing up, there was some great stuff, you know, from Sly and that whole era. I loved all that music, and it influenced me. It influenced Prince, and you could hear that. But I think Prince took it another. You know, he went off in his own direction, obviously. but the funk was definitely influenced there. There was also some funkadelic stuff. I felt like some George Clinton influence in Prince's material here and there. In fact, I just saw George Clinton and the Funkadelic band in Chicago on February 4th. I saw them. I happened to be there.
Nice, nice, nice. Sly Stone definitely influential on generations of artists, generations of talent. And, like we mentioned, 1999 being the cusp where Prince was starting to break on pop, top 40 radio, MTV with Little Red Corvette, 1999. And then, of course, The Monster came out, Purple Rain. What was your take when the idea was first brought and just seeing how the world responded not only to the soundtrack but to the movie as well?
Well, um, you hope in your mind, of course, that okay, we're going to work and make this happen, and let's hope they love it. Let's hope it sells. Let's hope people. It's entertaining. The point is entertainment and sending a message and writing songs that cut to the soul. And the influences, as we know, as we all heard, um, that he brought forth were a fusion of so many different artists that came before him. The style of writing
Mhm.
and everything. So, but the lyric content, it was all about his life, a lot of it, his influences growing up, Purple Rain, the
Hmm.
story, you know.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
Go ahead.
so no, that's all. I mean, I'm not saying it's a carbon copy of his life. I mean, there's obviously influences in there of his life growing up. Uh, so, it's one of those things,
Yeah, it's
as an
definitely.
artist, when you bring it from the heart, because from your own experience, it tends to make break through more than things that are contrived. Let's put it that way.
Hmm. I definitely agree because it was lightning in the bottle. Because when you hear "Let's Go Crazy," it has that punk feel with pop appeal. Because I hear hints of Blitzkrieg Bop by the Ramones on that record. I don't know if anybody catched it, but if you play Blitzkrieg Bop by the Ramones, then play "Let's Go Crazy," people are, hey, oh, let's go. Oh no, let's go. You can kind of hear that
Yep, yep.
Ramones-esque influence.
There's definitely some that rock influence on that. That's a rock and roll song. Let's go crazy. That is not funk. That's just rock pop, straight ahead. Go get them. High energy rock. That's what
Hmm.
that is.
Yeah, yeah, and I
I
want
mean,
to talk.
yeah. I mean, there's look at Hendrix and Lenny Kravitz. I mean, there's a lot of you know African American musicians out there who play rock and roll. It's not
Hmm.
funky. Doesn't have to be always be funky.
Hmm.
You can cross over and do all that. Can you mind if you hold on for just a moment? One
Yeah.
moment.
So, how did the Dr. Fink persona come about? Did you try any other looks before coming up with the surgical scrubs and the glasses?
Yeah, yeah. In the beginning, Prince was. We were all searching for images. We didn't have a lot of money, and we were trying to find our way image wise, without going into custom seamstresses and all that like Prince did later on in his career. This was like, where can we get some cool stuff off the shelf? And so he kind of gave us our own free reign in a sense of what to do. But for the very first show, though, that we ever did at the Capri Theater in January of 1979 for Warner Brothers executives, they flew into Minneapolis and we did an actual ticketed show for them, showcase. And Prince said, "Can you wear this?" He brought me something to wear. He said, "I wanted this. I was going to wear this, but it's too big for me." I bought it, and I went, "What is it?" And he goes, "It's an authentic Army issue paratroopers jumpsuit. It's what you wear when you jump out of an airplane or something." And it was cool. It had like the zippers and it was khaki and it was like all one fitting suit. Kind of, I thought it was kind of hip. I said, "Sure, I'll wear that." It fit me perfectly. So I wore that for that show, and I think I wore it for something else. But then by then he said, that's kind of bland. You got any other ideas? And I go, okay, I'll see what I can come up with. So I had somebody make me a gold and black lame tuxedo with Kale's jacket and a vest. And then I just wore like standard black satin pants with that. And I left it open, no shirt, just, like, I'm gonna be Dr. Fink, sexy guy, keyboard player in the, butler suit. I thought that's what I'm thinking. And Prince goes, yeah, that's kind of been done before. Well, let's try it. That's cool. So we did a video with me wearing that. And then I wore it on TV for the first time. And then Prince went, that's too Elton Johnny. Let's do something else. What else you got? And I go, how about a guy in a jail outfit, black and white striped jailer suit? He goes, now that's cool. I like that. So then I wore the jail suit, and we went on American Bandstand. I wore that when we debuted on there, and and then from there, I had to switch to the doctor because when we went on tour with Rick James several months later, he was wearing a jail suit on one of his songs during the show, busting out of L7. So I had to change my look according to Prince.
Oh
He
wow.
just said, she's the headliner. I want you to change your look. You got a jail suit. He wears a jail suit on one song. Let's switch it up. And he goes, you got any other ideas? This was about 3 shows into the tour with Rick James. So I said, yeah, I had one other idea, a guy in a doctor's office, surgeon's, a guy dressed like a doctor, surgeon, the whole thing on stage, costume. No, it's never been done before.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, that's really punky. That's very punk. I like that because punk was in like punk funk and all that at that time.
Mm-hmm.
The new wave era was in. You know, he kind of he liked bands like Devo and stuff like that. That new wave stuff that was happening,
Mm-hmm.
and so he liked that. So then I became the doctor right away, and it stuck, and that was it. And then later it changed here and there. I had different versions of the doctor suit, and like during the Parade album, he didn't even have me in anything that looked like a doctor suit on that album. I was wearing like a white paisley satin, almost pajama looking thing with little lapels. It was. He just thought, oh, we'll do this, which is
Mm-hmm.
cool. So yeah, it evolved over time.
Wow,
That look,
definitely don't throw
yeah,
it up against the wall and see what sticks. Pay attention to the visuals, but I could also see some hint of influence by wrestling. So I'm sure probably watching AWA and Vern Gagne, Mean Gene, Hulk Hogan, all of those guys, and just seeing how being bigger than life, larger than life, even when you're out in public, it was common back in those days to not break kayfabe, to where you got to be in character all
yeah,
of the time. Be bigger than the record. Be larger than life all the time, 24/7.
yeah. That was Prince's advice for sure.
Right,
To
right.
any artist out there, if you're going to be an entertainer, you really want to do that. If you're look at Lady Gaga.
Hmm.
She's one of the ultimate divas out there with her fashion sense. Her and Cher and Madonna, they all go there. They are always changing their look and experimenting with their look. And me, I was just static. I was the
Right.
doctor, but we did variations of the doctor, so I like
which
that.
which was all good. And you mentioned, I want to circle back to opening for Rick James and how was it a delicate dance to where you're on his tour. You guys
Mm-hmm.
know you're kicking butt and taking names, but you can't be so good to where you tick off the headliner because it may cause friction.
No, we didn't care about that. We just did our thing. We didn't care if it caused friction or if he was upset that we were kicking butt. And you know what? Even though we kicked butt, he'd come on and kick butt too. So who cares? That's how I looked at it. Why are we? I'm thinking to myself, why do we got to be competitive here? There's no need for that. People love you, Rick, just as you are. You're you.
Mm.
got a great following, and you're one of the only artists that I've ever seen that has the audacity to go on tour, call the tour and the album the Fire It Up tour, where you have two people walk out on stage during the song Fire It Up holding big paper mache marijuana joints with smoke coming out of the tops of them, right? So these two guys walk out, they're holding these things in front of them, big joints, they're like 8 foot high joints. I mean, and the smoke's coming out. This is the opening of the show. The entire arena lights up in weed. There's marijuana just like everywhere. You didn't even have to smoke any. All you had to do is breathe, and you might feel a contact high. Anyway, what's really funny is I'll never forget this on the tour. We were like in Alabama somewhere, I don't remember, maybe Mississippi. The police were watching Rick James. They knew that he was smoking marijuana on stage, and people were lighting marijuana in the arenas and all that. It was illegal. And I'll never forget, the police showed up to the show one day somewhere, like it may have been Alabama. And I was standing right there, and they went right up to Rick James and wanted to talk to him before going on to stage. And they said, "So Rick, we know you're smoking marijuana during your show, and we don't want to have to arrest you, so don't do that." They were warning him not to do it right before the show. So I don't know if he obeyed or not. Either way, the audience is still lighting up. I mean, the police couldn't control that. It's too hard, too many people. But did you know about that going on at Rick's shows during that time? Were you aware of
Yeah,
that?
yeah, and I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
the high was in the air once Mary Jane was performed, and it
Oh,
was super
absolutely.
icky all in the air.
Yep. And it's interesting. He was quite a visionary when it came to the marijuana, because look what's happened now. It's completely been reformed. Over half the country has legalized it for recreational use and medical use.
hmm And I want to talk about how did the chord progression for 1999 come about? Was dun 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 dun. What was the key of choice, and how did that progression come about?
Well, that was one of the songs that Prince wrote, where you'd have to ask him that question, that because that was one of those songs where he went, "Hey, band, here's the cassette. Go learn this song." Oh, and by the way, these are the sounds I used on that synthesizer.
Mhm.
So that's how he
So,
would present stuff to us at time, for certain songs like that were, you know,
mhm. Now was the same thing for Dove's Cry for the solo there? Was it where it was already pre-recorded and you go learn it, or did he ask for your input on that solo parts?
that one was all him. That one was all him, but he did a little trick in the studio. Did you know about that?
Um, no, please tell.
Okay. So for that one, um, I had to learn that solo off the recording, but what he did for that one in particular, not that he couldn't have played it at the speed that you hear the solo, but what he did is he slowed the tape down to half speed. In other words, he very speeded the tape. They call that VSO, or very speed. And he took that down a full octave. So he played it slow. So picture the song going halftime. The beat is whatever. Well, you hear it slow motion, and then he played those notes in half speed, wrote the solo, probably did several takes until he got it where he wanted it. And then he sped the tape back up, and that's what you hear.
Wow. I did
That's
not
the
know that.
trick.
I did
Nobody
not know
knows
that.
it. I'm the only one revealing that secret in these interviews. I've revealed this in several other interviews, but it's just a trick. It's a technique, a recording technique. He didn't do that for much. That's the only one I know where he did that to achieve that result.
Mhm. Now, where
But
you got go ahead.
technically, believe me, technically, he was every bit as capable as myself of recreating that live if he had to.
Mm.
But that was a way to make it sound. Gave it a weird, eerie sound too, by having it recorded super slow like that and then sped back up. it gave it that, like, what is that? It didn't
Hmm.
sound, it sounded otherworldly. Anyway, go
Right.
ahead. What were you going to say?
Right. I was gonna say, were you guys always paying attention to the latest musical technologies that was coming out, like the TR-808, the Lindrum, and saying let's embrace technology instead of
Yeah. Oh,
shunning
yeah.
it?
We tried everything. No, we tried everything. In fact, I was on top of that even more than Prince was at the time, because he was doing what he was doing and producing and writing and doing all this stuff. And I was more technical. So I was always working on programming and finding new synthesizers to show him. So I was always recommending and bringing in new stuff. And if he liked it, he'd buy it. If he didn't like it, he'd reject it and would go back to the store. But usually, the stuff that he picked out that I brought in, I would agreed with, and some of the stuff that didn't work out, I was like, yeah, that was a dud. Skip
Hmm.
that. But the arsenal kept growing year to year because obviously new things were coming out, and every year, or upgrades to what we already had. Like we used Oberheim's extensively
Hmm.
on his albums, and those went through different revisions as time went on. So we would get the latest version of their synthesizers every time they would have an upgrade, as well as keeping the previous models around
Wow.
too.
Wow. Wow. So was it
Yeah.
trial and error where you were locking yourself up in a room and pretty much saying, okay, I got to figure out how to do this, how to do that, get the settings right and everything to where when it comes time to perform, it's like clockwork.
Yes, but a lot of times the synthesizer manufacturers had excellent presets that would come with these machines. And sometimes Prince would use those and maybe tweak them a little bit and then save that program. Other times he might just go with what was there because it sounded so great, because the programmer who, you know, invented it, the machine at the factory and did programming, the programming guy came up with good stuff for all
Mm,
artists. So, yeah, definitely, just
mm.
depended on what we needed.
Right, right. And I want to shift real quick. We talked about the Jets earlier and how they had moved around different parts of the US before settling to Minneapolis. And when they came out with Curiosity, it definitely had that sounds like erotic city and just had that Minneapolis sound feel. And of course, Ready for the World, Oh Sheila sounds like Lady Cab Driver. You had Dream Boy that was out of Oak Park, Michigan. Definitely the influence of Prince and Minneapolis sound, the deal, and just how everybody was paying attention to what was coming out of Minneapolis. So, what was your take on seeing and hearing those sounds and how it's pretty much a flattering nod to your guys' work?
I thought that was great. Um, Prince always, he wasn't 100% happy with people kind of, he thought, okay, yeah, they're borrowing something that's a little too close, even though it's not a direct ripoff of a song. The production side was. So
Hmm.
that he would kind of make a little few remarks about criticisms about that. But if the song was a great hit, using that vibe, usually he was okay with it. But if it didn't sound right, he would make a comment if he felt
Right.
it wasn't right.
Right, right. And then I want to know what was your take on hearing what Jimmy and Terry was doing with their work with SOS Band, Alex,
Well, they're great.
Sherelle.
They had their own vibe. They definitely were architects of the Minneapolis song sound, along with Prince. They influenced each other, obviously.
Hmm.
But those time records were pretty much all Prince, writing and producing that stuff and playing most of the instruments.
Hmm.
Except, I mean, I played a solo on something on the first album on the stick, but everybody else, Jam and Lewis, they weren't really playing on those records. I
Right,
think, I think Morris might have played drums on some stuff. Am I right? But not everything. I know Prince was, playing on it too and did a lot of stuff. So
right.
that's all I can say. The man is a genius. That's an amazing feat to be that creative, to do that whole thing, and then do your own band, the other thing on the side, and then the Vanity Six in that era. Juggle all three of those acts. That's pretty
Yeah,
amazing stuff.
yeah, just oozing creativity and how I
Yeah,
can have all of these feeder acts to get all of this content out and I get to prevent overexposure and say, okay, all my time stuff's going to go R&B. All my Vanity Six, Apollonia Six stuff's going to be here. Revolution stuff's going to be here. And it was a way to have all the tentacles in the pot and say, okay, you guys are feeling me, but I have all these other splinter acts to get all this extra content that I want out,
Yeah, exactly.
which is amazing. And then after Purple Rain, the tour, and then the making of Around the World in a Day. Let's talk about that.
Okay. I'm sorry, I was coughing.
Yeah, let's
Say
talk
that again.
about the making of Around the World in a Day.
Oh, yeah. Well, that one I really wasn't too involved with. I just came in after the fact to learn the record primarily. I think maybe one song I played on, and I don't even remember which one it was.
Hmm.
That was one of the albums where I just got married. I was too busy doing something,
Hmm.
and they were recording without me.
Right, right.
One of those things. They didn't really need me much at that time, except to tour or play live at that time,
Hmm.
at that moment. At least
Right,
Prince. That's what was going on at that time.
right,
I mean,
right.
I was doing session work for some other albums that they were working on too. Those haven't seen the light of day. There's a couple Revolution albums that haven't been out yet, but there are pieces, dribs and drabs of it have been released on some of these new box sets, I believe.
Wow. Wow, I
Yeah.
definitely did not know that. And
Hmm.
let's talk about, Love Sexy and Sign of the Times.
Okay. Yeah. Again, his prolific songwriting again, was featured on all those records, with me just being kind of on the periphery in that era as his touring keyboardist,
Hmm.
with a little bit of session work on that stuff here and there.
Hmm. All
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So, what was it first like for you going into Paisley when it opened, just seeing how it looked and state of the art, and just really being fully in that studio to where, okay, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to do my thing.
Yeah, I was excited about it. It was very exciting for that facility, and I had high hopes for it, at the time.
Hmm.
And of course, the first thing we ever did in there was finish filming Sign of the Times concert film in there.
Wow.
So that was pretty cool
Wow,
doing
that's
that.
definitely dope, and going back to the Love Sexy album, me as a kid being around two, going on three, hearing Alphabet Street, and then a couple years later, hearing Tennessee by Arrested Development, and then hearing the Alphabet Street sample in Tennessee, and not catching it until years later, like, oh, they sampled, Prince.
Yeah.
And so what was your take on seeing hip hop coming in and how they're repurposing a lot of those records, and how Prince, he was very particular about letting people sample, will hardly let people sample, because I remember hearing that the first sample he actually cleared was Pray by MC Hammer, where Hammer sampled When Doves Cry.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool stuff. I mean, all that, actually, MC Hammer also did something with Soft and Wet too, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah, your sweetness, I believe, was the name of the record off. Please Hammer Don't Hurt 'Em, that samples soft and
Yeah,
wet as well.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, yeah, the Prince's influence was starting to, you know,
Right.
inspire people
Hmm.
for, to do that kind of thing. Hopefully, Prince got his samples licensed properly
Right.
for those artists. I think they did, because actually, you know what? I'm sure I heard about that getting taken care of properly for him.
Yeah, because this was the Wild Wild West in the late 80s, early 90s, where rappers were sampling records to where you hope it don't really too big of a hit, because you're gonna have to pay, because we all saw, James Brown and a lot of the older acts saying, hey, you guys are taking my records and I'm not being financially compensated for it. Whereas to now you got all the paperwork in place to where you go through the proper channels if you're gonna properly pay for a sample.
Yeah, no, you got to be careful because if you're an artist and you use someone's song like that, a sample, and you get caught, you could get sued. Got to be
Yeah,
careful about, make sure you pay your licensing fees for that.
yeah, or you'll get that cease and desist because that what ended up happening when Biz Markie had
Mhm.
sampled Gilbert O'Sullivan's "Alone Again" naturally off the "I Need a
Oh,
Haircut" album, and then that caused a big brouhaha to where Gilbert O'Sullivan won the lawsuit, and that record got yanked off the shelves.
yeah. Oh boy, that's not
And
good.
yeah, that's definitely not good. And I want to talk about you left, in 91. So what was that like coming off of that 13-year run and then going into a brand new space?
Well, it was change. It was a little scary, doing that, but I kind of enjoyed having the freedom to just do whatever I wanted at that point and not be beholden to anybody and their schedule. So it was good, you know.
Hmm.
It was bittersweet. I mean, I felt bad leaving at the time, actually,
Hmm.
but it was good timing in hindsight.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Definitely where it was, okay, I did all I could do here. I'm gonna go forge this new path and talk about what led you to create the operating room in Minneapolis.
Well, I just wanted to settle down and raise a family at that time. I wanted to have children, didn't want to be touring and be away from people on a regular basis because it's hard to raise kids and do all that when you're on tour, in my opinion. So I made that conscious decision to get into producing and working for record labels as a producer and help mentor other aspiring artists, bring them in the studio, help them achieve their goals musically, things like that. And that's
Right.
that's where I've been. But after a while, once my kids were older, I got back into playing live again more. So, and I never really stopped. I mean, I locally here, I would do a few gigs a year for fun with
Hmm.
friends, do some things just to keep active that way. But I became much more active playing live again and playing Prince music again live.
Right.
About 10 years after leaving Prince's group at
Hmm.
that
And
time.
yeah, you mentioned the role like Steve
Actually,
Perry.
actually a little bit longer than that, 15 years, I'd say.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned the road and how it could be a wear and tear, especially when you want to try to have that personal life. Like Steve Perry said in Faithfully by Journey, the road is no place to start a family, and how, was it where you would go from city to city, town to town, and you'll just be sequestered in a room prior to showtime or sound check, and you never really had that space to really breathe?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, I personally, like I said, I could get out and not be accosted by people or fans. I don't mind, I don't mind the fans, but if you're on the road, but sometimes you just want to be able to go out in public and not have to worry about signing autographs or talking to people because you don't have a lot of time to leisure time on the road. So I was fortunate in the sense I could go out and be more incognito than other members of the group, like I said. But nowadays in Minneapolis, nobody knows who I am. It's great.
Wow.
I mean, once in a while, don't get me wrong. I'll be out
Mm,
eating dinner somewhere. Hey, it's you, it's Dr. Fink, So people
mm,
still recognize me a little bit without
right.
my hair and makeup and I mean, obviously I've aged a bit more and I'm not as recognizable as I used to be, but you know, it's how it goes.
I mean, you get to eat your hot dish and go to Perkins in peace. I mean, you can't top that.
Right. Right. I mean, I don't know. Prince even told me one time, he said, you're lucky in the sense that you're not the guy who's the front man because like me, because I don't have a life. He's actually said that to me at one point when I was still in the band,
Wow.
that you're lucky that you are able to be incognito basically at
Wow.
times. And he
Wow.
couldn't.
Wow. Wow. That's
Yeah.
that's definitely
It's
crazy
deep.
because
It's deep. It's deep.
yeah.
And I didn't realize to what extent had to deal with that kind of stuff. And I did now, I get this now, early touring, I think maybe Controversy could have even been Dirty Mind, possibly. I'll never forget this. It was a theater in San Francisco. We finished the show, and this was before we had any like decent security around us or good bodyguard for Prince. Even it was like really early. I'm trying to remember when that was. It was just at, I think it was past the Rick James era, but the next step after that, and where we
Mm,
were playing by ourselves, not headlining in theaters and some other things. We left the back of the theater, and there was a had to be 30 screaming girls like you'd see out of a movie, like with the Beatles or somebody
mm,
with them people chasing you
mm,
down the street kind of thing.
mm,
They literally attacked Prince like piranha, like a swarm, a school of piranhas, tearing
mm.
his clothes off they tore his shirt to shreds, literally in front of my eyes, and
Wow.
took pieces of it.
Wow. Wow.
I'd never
That's
seen anything like that. I mean, that's
crazy.
how he moved the women sexually on top of it all. Whatever he did, he knew how to press that button
Mm,
in women to arouse their sexuality. I don't know. It's
right.
really something.
Yeah, it's definitely something, to behold, and how you mentioned earlier how he told you that, lucky that you're behind the scenes and you're not in front because I'm not able to really move and shake like I want. And I just thought about once again circling back to Michael Jackson, how they both kind of share that commonality to where you're so huge to where you can't even enjoy the trappings of your success and you feel like who can I
Yeah,
trust? I'm all alone. I have nobody to go to because
right.
I'm afraid everybody has their hands out wanting something.
Possibly. Yeah. It
You,
definitely is not an easy thing to be that high up in as I mean, thinking about Taylor Swift must be goes through half the time. I mean, you can't. You got to have bodyguards, and you got to be careful and go. It's all secure, and
mm,
it's like being the president or any
mm,
big wealthy guy, oil men. People
mm.
who are big name executives who make big money. They have bodyguards, all of them.
Right. Right. Now, speaking of bodyguards, do you know when Big Chick came into the picture?
Yeah, that was, I believe that was might have been the Controversy or 1999 tour. I don't know for sure. Might have been 1999
Mm.
when he was hired, but don't quote me on that. It could have been before that. I'd have to go back and I should have kept a diary and had the date written down, but no, I don't remember the exact date that he came on board.
Yeah,
I
because
remember it though. I remember meeting him the first day I met him. I can
yeah.
see him right now in my eye.
So what was it like seeing Big Chick for the first time?
It was like, wow, this is a big guy. He was a big man, and he was a character. He was literally, I mean, you saw him in the movie, and he just had this really special look about him, and he was towering figure. But he was a gentle giant. He really
Mm.
was. He was always nice to me, always gracious. He was never uh, difficult by any means with anyone. He was very good at what he did, and he worked for some big name oil people. That's why I brought that up because he was oil executive bodyguard for somebody for a while too.
Wow, definitely protecting that money. Now I was
Oh yeah.
curious, I want to know, did you have a chance to hear like Control, Rhythm Nation, or any of Jimmy and Terry's stuff before it came out publicly?
No, once Prince let Jam and Lewis go, I didn't see him a lot. They were off in their own world. I was in Prince world. They were in their thing. And so, yeah, I wasn't that close to them at all
Mm. So pretty
after
much
that.
everybody was kind of going on their different paths, even though you have that connection, but we're different paths, and if I see you, I'll see you. If I don't, I don't, but it's still all cool.
Right. Exactly. No, we're cool. I mean, we were still friends.
Hmm. Yeah, but when you think about, in retrospect now, just the influence of everything that came out of that, the revolution, the time, Jam, Lewis, Andre Simone, Jelly Bean, Monty, and all the associated acts, the family, and just how people still love and revere that era of music, and you have a hand in that.
Yeah, it's a very fortunate. I'm very grateful to have been a part of all that, and I'm still working with some of those people these days. I've been doing some live shows with a group called St. Paul and the Minneapolis Funk All Stars. Have you seen that online at all? You notice those gigs when they're popping
Oh yeah,
a little
yeah,
bit?
yeah.
You
St.
saw
Paul,
that?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
St.
he
Paul.
was from the family. He was the singer from the family back in the day. You just brought the family up, right?
Hmm.
Paul Peterson, right?
Yeah, yeah, of
You know who
course,
he
of
is?
course, of course, of course, of
Okay,
course.
so that's who I've been gigging with since late 2022.
Right. Wow. And it's crazy that you mentioned St. Paul. I inherited the original pressing of the family's vinyl from my aunt in South Carolina, still in good condition. And it
Yeah.
was when I was in college, right? I played Nothing Compares to You. And me going born in 85, I remember hearing Sinead O'Connor's version and how it became a huge pop worldwide hit. But once I heard the family's version, I'm like, oh, I like this version better.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's just me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You,
Well,
you know, go ahead.
no, no, you go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, and just how just hearing that stuff, and then of course, Tamara and the Scene, because I believe they were affiliated through you all, even though they didn't come directly through the Prince toll, but they had that same sound. Because I believe they came in under, I can't recall who they came in under, but Affection and Everybody Dance, great records, and then of course I mentioned Alex and Sherelle, and just when you hear, like I mentioned, a lot of the newer acts today, especially Bruno Mars, and how heavily influenced, he was by Prince. And it's just amazing to see how, his legacy still lives on.
Yeah, no, and what's interesting about people like Bruno that I've noticed, I mean, they take that vibe and they do something original again with it, but you can still hear where it came from, but it's still a new take on it, which I love. It's like, oh, this is a great arrangement, or that chordal thing, or yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Prince would have done that for sure, but it's a new take on it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what's cool about it,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
And I want to know
Still
what's your
original, still original. But go ahead.
yeah, yeah, I want to know what's your take now on seeing, because when I went to see Scene 2 and hearing Let's Go Crazy and seeing, the merch with the shirts and, hearing the records being played at, Timberwolves games, what's your take on seeing that explosion, and how do you think that, resonates with you having such a close association, seeing those records be put in a popular light because of everything that's transpired?
Well, it's nice to see after all this time, obviously. I think Prince's, I mean, the people who are handling his estate, I think, are instrumental in that. They must be, you know, going to those people that are have influence to play that material still at games and whatever. So, I think that's part of it. I think that they're involved, and then maybe even not. Maybe I don't know who's pulling the strings on all that, but it's flattering, that's for sure. That they're continuing to propagate Prince's legacy.
Right. And I had just read that originally there was going to be a Netflix documentary that was supposed to come out, but it ended up getting scrapped, not seeing the light of day. And me being a fan, I wish it would have been able to see the light of day. But hopefully, who knows, they may spin it back around the block, with it, and decide
Well,
to come
since
back
you're
out.
a fan, I want to ask you a question. Did you see the Rick James documentary,
Yes, I sure did.
the one that was on Showtime?
Yes, I did. Bitching.
Did you? And you saw the one, that you saw that his own daughter endorsed it and introduced it at the beginning of the documentary,
Yes, sir.
and she allowed all the positive and negative aspects of his life to be shown, correct?
Yes, sir.
The things that he was naughty things he did, or some not so nice things he was accused of and got in trouble for. So there are things in this Prince documentary that don't necessarily put him in the best of light. And,
Mhm.
and that's obviously been written about now. And some like New York Times Magazine had it on one weekend. I don't know. Did you see that article several weeks ago?
Yeah, yes, I
You're
read it.
aware of these things. So, okay. So as a fan, my question to you is, does that affect you? Those possible transgressions that are stated in these articles. So for me, in my perspective, and as a fan, I want to know what you think of it. And does that affect your opinion of Prince in a negative way, or do you forgive him? He's not with us anymore for those acts that are he's been accused of by these people. And the question is, you know, if you're a woman, how would you feel? Would you reject Prince after hearing that if you were a fan? Or because I've talked to some women already who say, no, it doesn't. I will always love his music. He's a human being. He made mistakes. He's not with us anymore. I feel bad. Blah blah blah. Yeah, he screwed up, but time to forgive and forget. We have to move on. So is that your opinion? It's my opinion at this point. I mean, I I read these stories and I know some of these people that were affected by that, but you know, I don't know. Are we supposed to cancel people over that after they pass on? You know, I mean,
Right.
look at Michael Jackson. His reputation's been tarnished. P. Diddy's about to get skewered completely. This man, the accusations against him are unbelievable. Way worse than I would ever have thought. And I met him. I did some work for him. Had no idea what was going on behind the scenes. It was a brief moment in time when I appeared on his show on MTV, the Making the Band thing that he did. I was helping produce one of the artists, and I was on camera for one of the episodes. The point being is, what do you do
Right.
at
Right.
this point? You know,
Right.
I I, I don't know what to say. I feel
Right.
bad about all of it, you know,
Right.
and
Right.
yeah, I mean, the if he did those things with those people, do you forgive him? Can those
Right.
women ever forgive him? I don't know, nor
Right.
should they have to. But
Right.
he's he's a man. He screwed
Right.
up.
Right. And I would say,
If it's
you
true.
know, yeah, if it's true. And I would say from the fans' perspective, loving Prince, his work, and how I mentioned being influenced to do this podcast because of him and trademarking the name and really owning and just feeling like, celebrities, they are human too. In that while you have a public spotlight, we don't know what goes on behind closed doors. And, with him no longer being here to defend himself, and I feel that, you know, what happened in the past is the past. And if you're able to forgive and move on, yes. If you're still not able to forgive, then, that's definitely something that got to be worked on within. But it doesn't change my love and respect and admiration for him. And I feel that if you're going to tell the full story about somebody's life, I feel that you should tell it all, warts and
Well,
all.
exactly, warts and all, and that's the phrase I've used as well. I wish they would put the documentary out, warts and all. At the same time, it may turn some people off from him,
Right.
from that behavior that's been uh, depicted in these articles.
Mm,
So I don't know. I don't. I
right.
hope it doesn't. It's a fine line because when Michael Jackson went through all of that, it was hard to watch, and you're just
Mm,
going, whoa. I mean,
mm,
hard to take, hard to believe. You got to go, okay, was he really? We don't know for sure because he was paying people off and this and that
right.
and the other thing, you know.
Mm,
But there were so many kids that came forward. It's hard to ignore it and not to. It's hard to not believe it at that point.
mm.
So that's the
Yeah.
problem.
Right.
And
Right.
granted, it doesn't excuse Prince from that behavior. It doesn't make it, it's definitely not cool to be doing what he did if from those kinds of perspectives. Pedophilia, on the other hand, is another whole nother uh, thing to me, another
Mhm.
level of depravity.
Yeah, yeah,
Unfortunately,
yeah, I definitely agree. And I always use this analogy when I compare Michael and Prince, that it felt like Lakers Celtics in their prime, where they were both watching each other from afar, respecting what the other's doing. But it's like, hey, two different lanes where I felt Michael was more of, I'm making it for the people accessible. Prince was an artist. He didn't
yeah,
care whether it crossed over. If it crossed over, good. If it didn't, so be it.
yeah, he was writing for himself, I think, more than anything, half the time. So he wasn't going, oh, this is good. I'm going to make a hit now. I'm just going to write. But whereas Michael was definitely with his producers, and they were trying to write pop hits. They were trying to write hits in mind, and all that. And maybe Prince was too. He never said. He just would do it, and it's like he never said, I'm writing a hit. I need to write a hit. I'm
Mhm.
trying to write a hit. He would never talk about it. He would just
Right,
do it, and it would happen.
right,
He wrote so many songs. I mean, there's so much stuff unreleased sitting there, and
right.
obviously the estate people recently just announced no Netflix thing, and then we'll put out more material from the vault.
Wow. Yeah,
So that's what
and
they said.
wow. And I wondered, did do you know if Prince ever demoed Oak Tree?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I was curious if he ever
Probably.
demo Oak Tree, but I heard him demo Screams of Passion, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, funky. Funky,
Yeah.
funky, 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 funky. Now, I want to ask you this. We just lost Quincy Jones a couple of months ago. Can you talk about his influence on music and how it was a monumental loss, not only for the music industry, but for pop culture as a whole?
Yeah. Uh, Quincy, by far one of the powerhouses in the music industry. I had the fortune to meet him more than once and speak to him. Never had the opportunity to be around him while he worked or to work on something he was working on at the same time. But uh, he really wanted to work with Prince and tried to. Prince rejected that idea, and they they tried to get Prince to be in the video for the song "Bad," which I'm sure that story's been told. And then Prince didn't like the lyric about "your butt is mine" and all that. And he said Prince even said that in an on camera interview. So it's funny. It's too bad they couldn't have joined forces for something else,
Right.
And but regardless, you're talking about two guys with some pretty serious, the king of pop and the prince of music. I mean, it's like it's a tough ego sell. You have
Right.
those two guys. But
Yeah.
you know what, Sinatra, you had the Rat Pack. Those guys were a bunch of suave, debonair,
Mhm.
Las Vegas, poppy jazz singers. Prince and him could have done a duet. Look,
Mhm.
David Bowie did a duet with Bing Crosby, for God's sake, on a
Right.
Christmas special.
Right.
So
Right. Right. Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah, because I know they wanted to get Prince on We Are the World, but Prince was like, nah, and he ended up contributing, I believe, was Tears in Your Eyes for
right,
the
right.
USA for Africa. Sheila E. was in We Are the World, but when I saw the Greatest Night in Pop doc, it almost kind of felt like, okay, we got debate. We're gonna see if she's gonna be able to hook them, lure them in, get them down to the studio to record. But that never happened. But that definitely would have been a collaboration to see if Prince and Michael Jackson would have did something together. That would have been monumental.
Yeah, I don't know. He didn't want to do it for some reason.
Right, right. And I want to know, seeing the fight up close with the music industry and how Prince was willing to stand 10 toes down and say, look, this is my birth name. You guys are taking my name, making millions of dollars off of it, And the contract that I signed was totally unfair and it's not in my favor. And he scrawled slave on his face to really hammer home a point. And how when you see now with the use of the internet and how people can go direct to consumer, he was doing that with mpg.com and emancipation crystal ball, all of those records, and how he was very for the artist and say, hey, do it yourself. It's like Vegas. The house is gonna always win, and how he was always dropping jewels to people saying, hey, make sure you own your stuff, make sure you own your masters, make sure that you know the business because it is 90% business and 10% show.
Yeah, so he was giving good advice to young artists. Um, the music industry is a it's a very strange thing. So I've been trying to navigate it all these years, and then when streaming came in, it really affected people as well from a financial standpoint. But you know, um, the Prince weathered the storm pretty much, through there. But it's not easy these days for artists to make a living
Yeah, it's definitely
because of
not
that.
because yeah, because there's plenty of books and plenty of articles that talks about the royalty rates for streaming is terrible. Even though you're getting millions and millions of streams, you're only gonna make but so few dollars because of the royalty rates being not what they should be.
Yeah, possibly. I don't know. It's such a I don't understand it, the algorithms yet. I've tried, we've studied it, is how they set their pricing and based on streams, but it's tricky. That's a
Mm,
tricky one.
mm,
So they have improved it, that things have gotten better. I
mm,
will say that there were some things that the government did several years ago that helped pay better royalty rates for streaming.
mm. Right.
So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Some people are doing okay with it, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, but and it's almost like where it's kind of back to the days of when music was regional, where I appeal to my demographic, forget mass appeal.
Hmm.
If I could just appeal straight to my demographic, my group, I can make steady money and have a loyal following without needing to go to everybody else in order to be liked, well received, and receptive.
I suppose, yeah,
Right.
it's true. You
Right.
can find niches in the niche
Mhm.
areas of the population.
Right, right. And I want to know for you, what was it like coming back to the revolution with yourself and the rest of the gang, coming back and performing together?
It was great. I love those guys. It's fun getting back and reuniting, playing gigs. A lot of fun.
Hmm. And can you talk about current projects that you got going on?
Uh, yeah, a little bit. I'm just currently, doing session work for various projects. Pretty much like you're talking about for independent artists who are just promoting themselves on the web as best they can, and utilizing all the streaming services and so on and so forth.
Okay. Yeah, definitely, definitely check them out there on those various projects. And before
But
we wrap,
wait,
go ahead.
wait, wait, wait. I'll name one in particular they could go look at, and it's that I've been playing keyboards on lately. It's a project called Bipolar Buck, Buck. So the word bipolar and then Buck, and that's on Spotify as well
Bipolar
as
Buck.
probably app. Bipolar Buck.
Okay. Bipolar Buck. Check them out on wherever you stream in this, and you can find them there. And before we conclude this interview, do you have any shout
Oh
outs you
wait,
want to
I
give?
got
Go ahead.
one more thing. I got one more thing to promote. That would be my son Max, who goes by Max Millie, MVXMILLI, Max Millie, and he's about to release an album
Okay.
very shortly. Yep,
Okay. Yeah.
yep. So that's coming out soon.
Yeah, definitely check it out. Check it out. So
Hmm.
before we conclude, any shout outs you want to give, any people you want to thank, and then where can people find you if you're on the socials?
They can find me on, Instagram at Matt Fink one and Matthew Fink on Facebook or Dr. Fink page. There's a Dr. Fink fan page there on Facebook, and then the Revolution page on Facebook. Um, and my personal email is just drfink1981 at gmail.com.
All right. And there you have it, people. And you can catch this interview wherever you stream podcasts and on the official YouTube channel at youtube.com/, beyond the album cover. Ladies and gentlemen, let's definitely give a big round of applause, a big thank you from the bottom of our music loving hearts to the one, the only, the legendary Dr. Fink. Dr. Fink, thank you for coming on to the podcast and you're welcome back anytime.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir.